Dr. Mohammad Farzaneh. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, thank you, Amber.
You're a postdoc at the Center for Quantum Information Physics at NYU.
hmm
Please tell us a bit about your current work, what you're working
My current work. Well, I'm an experimentalist, or basically an experimental physicist. I work on superconductors, semiconductors. Um, I measure properties of semiconductors and superconductors.
on. Mhm.
Well, basically, the focus is on low temperature physics in this lab.
Low temperature physics.
Yeah.
Okay. And has that always been the interest from the very beginning? Were you born thinking that low temperature physics is the place to be, or is that
No,
something that has
certainly
developed?
not. Yeah,
Oh,
certainly not. Well, yeah. So I generally was interested in physics since high school,
hmm.
and just wanted to learn about different phenomena, electromagnetics, superconductivity,
Hmm.
semiconductors.
Cool stuff.
Yeah.
And did that then lead you to pursue a bachelor's in physics? Tell us a bit about your academic backgrounds.
Well, no, the bachelor's degree was in electrical engineering.
Okay.
Um, so the process was so maybe I can go back. In high school, I had a very good physics teacher, which kind of basically uh, put the seeds of love of physics in our class,
Hmm.
and I got interested in physics, but the thing that I got exposed to at that time was mostly electromagnetics.
Hmm.
So I thought maybe electrical engineering is closer.
I see.
So I studied. I chose to study electrical engineering.
It's bachelor's. I see. It's funny that that's what kind of attracted you most at the time, at least in physics, because that like electromagnetism often is the subject that turns people away from physics. I mean, I as a physics student myself,
You felt
electromagnetic
that way?
theory was horrible. It was
Okay.
devastating. Um, but would you say that a bachelor's in electrical engineering has given you the relevant tools to help you move easier into the field of physics where you now conduct your work? Was it a tough transition or was it something
Um,
that was seamless?
well, I don't know. It was all part of the journey. Like
Mm,
I was just interested in learning different phenomena.
mm.
So it it didn't matter to me whether it's called electrical engineering or it's called physics or applied physics or anything in between. As long as I was taking physics or physics related courses, I was happy. Yeah,
That's a beautiful mindset. I guess it kind
yeah,
of weaves in perfectly with the type of interdisciplinary work that you do right now. Because from what I understand, there's a lot of skills that you employ at the same time to make, use of to have the ability to produce good work. You can't just be focused in one discipline of skills.
yeah, yeah. I guess that's a good way to put it. I'm using the skill set that I developed in undergrad,
Mm.
so a lot of electrical measurements, knowledge of just basic electronics is certainly helping me right now measuring, um, like setting up my uh, physics measurements.
I see. Would you
Yeah.
say that that's something that's common between any form of engineering background to someone transferring to the sciences, or is it more specific to electrical engineers transferring to physics? So, if I had
Mm-hmm.
a mechanical engineering degree, for example, would it be as easy or even helpful for me to transfer to, let's say, a degree or work in chemistry later on?
Well, I think any kind of engineering, you get exposed to a good amount of math,
Hmm.
and also physics. Let's say electrical or mechanical, uh, you learn a lot of physics during those studies or programs. And so, I mean, it's certainly not irrelevant.
Okay,
So
that's a good start.
you can, I think there is nothing uh, stopping you from going from engineering to any other major.
I see. So anyone that's currently pursuing perhaps a degree in engineering should not perhaps feel despair that this is the only thing that they can spend the rest of their life doing in case they want to transfer
Yeah,
to
for
the
sure, for
to
sure.
the darker side of science.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, as long as you're curious,
Yeah.
you keep your curiosity about your environment
Mm.
or the world, then you're good. You just keep learning.
Okay. We'll get to that part
Yeah.
more in a bit because I would love for you to elaborate further on it.
Hmm.
But I'm a bit more interested in the degree that you pursued after your bachelor's. Did you decide to continue on the path of electrical engineering, given that it's provided you with this set of very diverse skills that you have found
Hmm.
to be transferable to the domain that you currently work in? Was it something that you continued pursuing, or did you have a shift?
So, spoiler alert, I studied electrical engineering again at grad school.
Okay.
Uh, so, thing was that there are practicalities like um, I couldn't get admitted to any, like I didn't even try applying for a physics degree for grad school.
Okay.
So I thought maybe I can find something in electrical engineering that's closest to physics, and that was semiconductors.
Was there a reason as to why you were unable to apply for a science degree?
Well, there was so many tests and courses that I had to take, and
Hmm.
like there was GRE physics
Oh.
you have to take.
Hmm.
Not anymore, I guess.
Not anymore, fortunately. That was
Yeah,
actually one of the
many.
things that prevented me
Oh,
from
okay.
applying to more graduate
Yeah.
degrees. Even though I had the general one, which was a nightmare on its own.
Hmm.
2 months of basically not seeing any of my friends, not talking to any of the loved ones,
Yeah.
camping to practice for the single test that is now obsolete. Like you could apply to
True.
one of the best universities in the world, and more likely than not, it's not something that's taken into consideration even anymore.
Yeah. So it was mostly practical issues
I say,
rather than just uh, choosing the what you want to study.
I say. And your PhD, where did you take that?
Um, this very university, but at a
Oh, yeah,
different department, NYU Tandon
Tandon. That's the
School of
engineering
Engineering.
school.
Yeah.
Okay. And how would you? Yeah, your bachelor's was not at NYU as well, was it?
No,
Okay.
bachelor's degree uh, from Sharif University in Iran.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So, if you were to try and describe the major differences between an undergraduate degree and a graduate degree,
Hmm.
how would you do that?
Um, the difference between undergraduate degree and graduate degree. Well, I assume you're by graduate degree you mean PhD.
Sure.
Um, if that's the case, well, the way I see it is in undergrad, you get a set of courses that you have to pass, and then you get exposed to different kind of courses. Um, so you get a flavor of every
Mm.
subject. But in grad school, let's say if it's PhD or research focused masters, you you dive into one subject, um, maybe a few topics, but all of them very tightly related to each
I see.
other. Um, so you spend years studying a specific set of problems instead of just passing courses.
I see.
So it's more on the research side
So it's
than courses.
so it sounds like it would be fit for someone that knows that they're very interested in that topic, because that
Exactly.
because not only is it a very parochial focus, but it's also a lengthy amount of time doing the same thing over
True.
and over again.
Yeah. It's another way to put it is comparing with the homework that you do in undergrad. You have lots of smaller problems that you have to figure out and then practice. Um, but then in grad school, you have this very hard problem that nobody has attempted or nobody has solved,
Mm.
and then you spend years on that and figure out every uh, little detail or every aspect of it.
So, yeah, so maybe tracing back to that quality that you mentioned earlier about someone being interested enough to learn about their environment,
Mm-hmm.
that perhaps would be a good indicator for someone that would maybe thrive or at least survive in the sciences.
Yeah.
If someone's listening in today and they're considering a career in science, whether it's through the industry or in academia,
Mm-hmm.
what would you say are the indicators that they should look for within themselves to perhaps have a better idea if they have the predilection to be able to be someone that is a successful scientist? Not just the scientist that is employed or can find a job, but to truly be a successful scientist. From your experience as a successful scientist yourself and your fellow peers as well, is there a set of common traits between these individuals that
Mm-hmm.
give a hint of the idea that they maybe might be really good in the sciences?
Well, that's a good question. Um, I'm still figuring this out, like as I go on and
Mm.
do research. But I think some of the characteristics would be just persistence, like persisting. If you don't know the answer to a problem, you 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 keep looking.
Mm.
You don't give up. Um, and basically the ability um, to focus and not get bored uh, of a topic or a problem. Um, at the same time, the ability to zoom back, like see the big picture,
Mm.
like why you're doing this, why you're so focused on this specific problem, and then see how that is related to the big picture in terms of what the solution of this problem would entail, or
So,
how this would change the general um, view of the field.
mm. So you need to have the ability to focus enough to perhaps find the nuances of the problem you're attempting to solve, and at the same time zoom out when necessary to look at the bigger picture and
Sure.
understand why you're doing this and how it can fit into the other body of science that has already existed. Or maybe if you're innovating something from scratch, you'd have to have the ability to alternate between these focus zones.
True. Yeah, I guess if I want to summarize, it would be just um, hold on to your curiosity.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that point of, I want to dig a bit more into that point of getting bored,
Mm-hmm.
because it almost sounds fantastical that someone would be doing a particular type of work for what, 4 or 5 years in their PhD, and they would not get bored at all. So is it truly someone not at all getting bored with the type of work that they're doing, or is it relating to the first point that you made about persistence? continuing to do the work regardless of whether you're passionate or not about it? Is there a balance that
Um,
needs to be struck between both
well,
of
it's
these?
hard to do work if you're not passionate about it.
Hmm.
I don't know. Maybe getting bored is not the right term that I use.
But passion is an important factor in all of this.
Yeah, what I'm thinking is passion. I mean, you lose passion after some point
Hmm.
when you look at a problem from different angles,
Yeah,
and then you basically know a lot about the problem. Then maybe at that point it's not
hmm.
as interesting to you anymore. Um, but maybe the uh, reminding yourself that the big picture, what the big picture is,
Hmm.
that could help you figure out how to navigate or redirect if you're losing your passion or patience or interest in a given problem.
I'll see.
It's very hard to nail down.
Yeah,
I don't know how to answer
because
that.
that's like it's a very I understand it's a very difficult question. Like I've struggled by like in answering that question myself often, and I've asked a bunch of other peers as well. Because generally in life, it's not always going to be tasks that you're passionate about for you to get to where you
Mm-hmm.
want to be. So at some point, you're going to have to come across particular hurdles that are necessary for you to achieve that bigger picture that you've set for yourself. So that requires a lot of discipline and persistence, like you said. But at the same time, if there is not an overarching passion that somehow has this impetus to drive you towards that final vision,
Mm-hmm.
then it would be difficult to provide a reason for that discipline that you're putting into the thing. So it's all about like somehow striking a balance between both of these. But it seems like it's empirical that you need to have passion about a particular topic to pursue it in the science. Otherwise, it's a failed attempt.
Yeah, that's you summarized it pretty well. But the thing is, you can make yourself be passionate about like anything. So it's like if you say you have to have passion,
Yeah,
you can't have it.
yeah.
It's yeah, it doesn't work that way. But if you feel passionate about something,
Mm.
yeah, pursue it, see what happens.
Okay. So just to kind of put a pin in this and nail the
Yeah.
coffin. So let's say I'm someone that just finished my bachelor's degree in physics, for
Mm-hmm.
instance, and I hear that quantum computing is a growing field. It's where all of the hype is at. I
Yeah.
enjoyed physics in my undergrad because I got to learn about so many things. And I'm not quite sure whether quantum computing would be the field where my passion would lie.
Mm-hmm.
What can I do in that situation? Should I apply anyway and then discover throughout my PhD? Or should I maybe take some time to do a bit more research? And if I do, is that enough to truly find out whether I'm passionate about it or not? What exactly can I do to confirm to myself in a way that is as at least not too biased whether I'm truly passionate about something?
Uh-huh. So the question is not physics anymore. It's a specific part of physics, whether
Yes,
I should study quantum computing or
yes.
not. So I think majority of the universities in the U.S., if you, let's say, you get admitted to a university, then uh, they will give you some time to figure things out. Um, Try different courses, talk to different professors, um, read different books.
Even at the
Um,
PhD level.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it takes time to find a good problem to work on. It's
Hmm.
not that you start working on the ultimate problem day one of your PhD. Part of PhD is to figure out what the problem is actually.
Interesting. Okay. So anyone that's applying to a PhD program does not need to have everything figured out, exactly what they're going to work with, who they're going to work with, and what topic they want to contribute to in the sciences. It's something that
Sure,
there's some form of leeway to explore in the program.
sure. As long as they're happy with the university
Yeah,
or the place that they're going to live for the next 5 years, um, because those are important as well.
mm,
Then the rest they can figure out. Uh,
we'll see.
that's
Okay,
part of the process.
all right. 5 years. That's a long commitment.
At least.
At least, yeah. Okay. So perhaps tell us a bit more about your experience being a PhD student. How would you, first of all, if you had to characterize it using 3 words,
Hmm.
how would you?
3 words. A lot
Yeah,
of frustration. So frustration, first word.
frustration.
Patience
Hmm.
and learning.
Frustration, patience, and learning. In that order?
In that order. Because the nature of research is that you're always blocked by something, unless very few times that you make breakthroughs or jumps. Um, so there's always you're always stuck at something most of the time.
Mm,
But then there are happy days where you figure out something, figure out the solution of the problem, or figure out how the code works. Um, on certain days, you have major uh, progress, but majority of it is just frustration.
I see. And do these steps forward to you, do they justify the amount of frustration that you experience without any results as someone that's
Yeah, I guess you would learn how to deal with that frustration. So um, after some point, you see it as um, part of the thing that you have to go through, and it's not as bad anymore.
I see.
So you see it. Everybody works every day, um, and I'm sure everybody gets frustrated, no matter what their job
Mm,
is. So that's part of the job, part of the um, PhD style research. Um, and it's highly nonlinear. You get stuck in a problem
mm,
for months, and you don't get any results. But then suddenly, one day, you go for a walk, you go, um, I don't know, you go climbing, skiing, whatever.
hmm.
It, it just the idea comes to you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I see. And how big of an influence do you believe that speaking to other peers, whether it's other PhD students that are from your batch or other professors at the university, how much influence or how much importance would you attribute to that when it comes to getting progress in solving these problems that you're interested in?
Mm-hmm. Um, well, for my case personally, I tried for so long to figure things out myself on my own, and it did not work well. So that was part of my learning process. I learned that I have to talk to people,
Mm,
to consult with others, um, even if they don't know much about my problem. The mere fact of explaining your problem to somebody else,
mm.
that makes you look at it differently. Um, and surprisingly, you can get help from people
Good
if you
people.
ask.
If yeah, that's an important thing
Yeah.
actually, because most people expect that at some point, like all of the knowledge is going to be thrown at them,
Yeah.
whether if they study enough or they look at enough videos. But there's a particular amount of effort that one needs to invest into talking to other people and trying to evoke that information out of them as well.
Yeah.
It's
True.
not
I
something that's
mean,
easily.
Einstein doesn't happen in isolation.
Yeah, yeah.
Even Einstein used um, papers wrote by his contemporaries,
Mm.
like Hilbert. He used that for his general relativity.
Mm. Einstein is this a scientist or
Just a fellow from Princeton.
a humble postdoc? I see. Okay. Tell us a bit more about the the struggle that PhD students normally go through. Because very often what I come across is people that are very passionate about what
Mhm.
they've gotten themselves into in terms of the program. At the very beginning, the first year, everything is
Yeah.
great. Then they're getting, in the US at least, they're enlisted in all of these courses. They're learning a lot. It's exciting because by nature, people that pursue science are curious individuals, at
Mhm.
least most of them. And then does that remain throughout the program,
I
or is
see.
it something that alters towards the end? And does it become more difficult to be patient? Does it become more difficult to be persistent with your work, or is it something that you learn to
Mhm.
become better at?
Well, there are things you can control, but other things you can't. Um, let's say persistence.
Yeah.
I mean, you can control your schedule, you can control how much you work, um, you can control how you work. Um, all that is in your control. But on the other hand, if you say passion or interest, that's more like a feeling that happens to you.
Yeah.
There's no control over it. So yeah, you might lose passion midway through PhD. You might hate the problem that you're working on.
Mm.
Um, all that stuff can happen. Um, but I mean, there's only so much you can control. Uh, and for me personally, reminding myself uh, why I'm doing this, why I started, or just reminding myself of my vision, where I want to be at the end, uh, help me to continue to go on without um, basically paying attention, paying too much attention to my feelings, passion, uh, etc.
Mm. And now that you're here, you're done with your PhD.
Yeah.
What are, let's say, two things that now in hindsight you would have changed about your experience in your PhD? What would you have done differently?
A good question. Well, I would have talked to uh, people earlier. Sometimes I would spend weeks on a problem
Mm.
without consulting anyone. Just, I mean, that's one way to do it. Uh, but anytime that I consulted with people about a problem,
Mm.
it helped me uh, to try to come up with ideas and try out different ideas.
Would you have continued your focus on your academics as much, or perhaps you think
Oh, you
you,
mean work-life balance?
for example, if you want to
Yeah,
talk about that,
sure.
yeah,
That's a good point. Yeah, that's something I my life outside the PhD
yeah.
program. That's something I overlooked. Um, yeah, it's sometimes hard to navigate, but the thing is, um, in hindsight, the mistake that I made about um, work life was that I kind of felt attached to to the research that I was doing. So it had become part of my identity.
I see.
I was not anything beyond just a PhD student
Mm.
working on this specific problem
Mm.
at this point in time and space. So that tying your work to your identity is really dangerous. You um, the thing is, I might have felt good whenever I
Mm.
made progress in research, but on the other hand, because there is long periods of frustration and basically getting stuck, that was demoralizing.
Mm.
If you tied it to your identity,
Mm.
that
Mm.
would be
Mm.
demoralizing.
That's a very good point. It's a very good point. So you'd have added some more flavor from outside of the academic effort that you were investing into the PhD.
Yeah, I mean that's more like a perspective shift.
Yeah.
That just realizing that your research or what you do as basically work
Mm.
is not you.
Mm. Mm. I mean, most of most of the advice that we hear now, whether you're on LinkedIn, for example, or you're speaking to a committee here at NYU, where they're very
Mm-hmm.
concerned about the well-being of the employees or the students and whatnot, they often speak about striking this work-life balance, right?
True.
But if we're being truly pragmatic, if you're someone that really wants to achieve in the sciences, can you afford to do anything but your work?
Well, it depends on what you mean by achieve. Um, well, achievement in science, yeah, the more you work, the more you achieve,
Okay.
I assume. But yeah, it depends on your priorities. Do you want to become a scientist with no life and just misery?
Mm.
uh, but with a few more papers or a few more recognitions.
Yeah.
Um, so that's a balance. That's different for everyone.
So it can be achieved. It
It's for
depends
everyone to
more.
figure out.
I see.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, this fellow Einstein,
Yeah.
he would play violin.
Upcoming. Yeah, yeah. Okay. All right. So now looking at your current work and reflecting back on all of the science that you've had to do over the past years, is it rewarding to be a scientist?
Well, yeah, you basically um, the reward is in feeling good about yourself when you solve a problem,
Mm.
or when you figure out how a measurement setup um, is supposed to be, or when you figure out how to fix your code, or all these little things.
Mm.
Um, but in terms of more tangible financial aspects, it is, I mean, it's decent. It's not,
It's not where
uh,
the big bucks are.
well, it depends on what you want to do. If you want to continue doing research in academia, that's you can have a decent life,
Mm.
but um, you probably can't afford luxury cars or something.
Mm. Okay. I personally.
Well, all that is basically assuming that you're in the United States.
Mm. Yeah, the discussion becomes much more difficult because science, I mean, the interest in science is not the same in the States or other countries as it would be, for example, as in the Middle East.
Exactly.
Um, which kind of brings me to my next question. Um, why does science matter? Like, this is great stuff. You're putting your tools together, you're coming
Mm-hmm.
up with stuff to publish, you're collaborating, you have these amazing labs. Okay, this is wonderful. What's the point? How is this helping society?
Is that a philosophical question?
Sure, you can interpret it as that. Yeah. And you could also
How does
talk about
that?
actual tangible effects that science has on society. Let's say I'm an upcoming nation and I have 100 billion in my budget. Why should I allocate 2 billion of my
Mhm.
budget towards research and science?
Well, I think one answer would be the example of United States. How progress in science leads to progress in technology in
Mm.
um, private sector. Um, so basically, um, all the different technologies in the past several decades um, are derived from scientific progress. Let's say internet or computers, semiconductors, um, material discovery.
Mm.
So the United States is basically showing us an example of how or why you can invest in science.
So it helps us develop technologies that could perhaps maybe make life just easier, or can it also solve pressing problems on society, or is it just things that would be nice to have?
Well, I think it gives you a set of tools, better tools
Mm.
to tackle those problems. Yeah, I mean, those would be, we're getting into territory of policy here.
Yes.
So, um, yeah, certainly science and uh, consequently technology can give you tools, but then it's on you how you use it for
Mm.
solving problems that you care about as a nation.
That's it.
But having that is, I assume, better than not having
Those tools at
those
hand.
tools. Yeah.
Okay. Follow-up question to that would be, let's assume I'm a nation that is not the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And the United States does exist and other nations like it that are pioneering technologies and investing all of this funding into the sciences and research and whatnot, developing these technologies that would be useful. As a country that's independent of that,
Mm-hmm.
would it be a good idea for me to perhaps neglect funding in science and rely on other nations to import those technologies? Since someone is already doing it, why should I bother as a nation or a state to do that
Mm-hmm.
myself? Is that something that is at all of relevance? Is there content in that question to begin with, or is it something that is irrelevant? If the science
Well,
is there in the
that's
world,
I don't know much about uh, that aspect of things, but I guess what I can say is, yeah, there is benefit in being independent um, to some extent. It all, I guess, depends on priorities.
would it maybe
Whether I don't know if there are um, the the matters of independence or security or um, uh, revenue, all those things like financial
mm,
things, all that can benefit from developing your own technologies,
mm,
not being dependent on other countries. But
So,
yeah, I understand that there's only so much you can do, or there's only so much independence you can get.
hmm,
It's like all interconnected.
let's see. So it seems that if one does indeed have the ability, given the resources, it's still a good idea. Not just for doing science for the sake of science, but it also affects your own society in multiple ways, more subtle ways than we can think of. Like you said, the economy, perhaps, or if it's an issue of national security, developing something that is more catered towards your society rather than something that is designed for another.
Yeah. So another interesting thing is that you never know what you're gonna get.
Hmm.
So let's if like let's take a look at the like olden times,
Yeah.
like the Islamic civilization.
Hmm.
It was basically a system of government uh, allowed, not even allowed, it facilitated scientific discovery.
Hmm.
Scientists had their basically the tools and the freedom they needed to um, generate new ideas
Hmm.
and new science, be it in mathematics or chemistry, astronomy, all the,
Algebra,
yeah.
medicine. Yeah. So,
So having an environment that is conducive
hmm.
to um, science um, exploration, that is certainly helpful. Um, we have, yeah, there is a track record of um, so many different discoveries in different fields, from good examples throughout history.
Hmm. That's a very interesting point. So it's almost as if we can say that the journey itself of doing science, that on its own, regardless of what we end up coming up with from it, is something that can benefit society because we don't necessarily know what can come out of it. You could be targeting a particular problem, and for all you know, your setup or your findings lead you to something else. Or you could even find a solution to the problem that you've initially postulated, and then you realize that that same answer that you got could also be a solution for a different problem.
Exactly.
Maybe a
Yeah,
problem
that's a
that
good point.
maybe a problem that isn't even extant today.
Exactly.
I can't help but think of the laser. I think for the longest time people would say that it's a solution that's looking for a problem, and I think that could be a good theme for a lot of the things that we come up with in the sciences.
Yeah, that's a good example.
Would you say that there's any social benefits to a nation that practices science? Does that trickle down at all, or is it just towards this very
Well,
niche group of crazy scientists that are doing the science? Is there like apart from the economy, apart from all of that, is there something that you think perhaps finds its way and penetrates through the network of society that changes society one way or another to have a society that's literate in the sciences?
well, I the closest thing I can think of is education.
Hmm.
Like, how do you raise kids? How do you educate kids in a society? So part of the research or part of the science is basically involves figuring out how humans learn, or
Hmm.
what are the best ways to learn. Um, and I know your question is a bit different, but one can make a case for education. The better society invests in science, the better um, education it'll
Hmm.
it'll it'll have.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point. It's a very fair point. I mean, one of the one of the things that is often a problem, as to where both from, is people that pursue the sciences, unfortunately, because of the lack of opportunities in our region for people that are in the sciences compared to elsewhere, the conventional career path is becoming a teacher. And that is often something that is looked down upon, as if it's not those teachers that instilled that seed in you that you spoke of earlier to make you the great scientist that you are today. People that pave the way society comes up to facilitate those individuals to become great professionals, great scientists that can one day help their nations.
Mhm.
Um, and I think there's a lot of value to having teachers from those countries themselves rather than importing professional teachers from elsewhere, because there's still some form of connection that cannot be developed unless you've lived in the same environment, you've experienced the same culture. You can have the ability to provide more relevant examples and relevant pathways for the student to understand a particular concept that someone from a different cultural environment would not be able to. And maybe one day, and we could find that the ideal would be a combination of both of these to provide what is relevant to you from your own society as well as experience from elsewhere to perhaps open up your mind a bit more as well.
Exactly.
So if if you were someone that was responsible for the education of younger individuals in society, what advice, let's say you were on the committee, what advice would you provide to that committee to be able to hone these students better to be more prepared for the sciences later on?
Well, I only know abstract solutions,
Sure.
and that would be maybe figuring out how to teach children to think for themselves.
Mm.
That's the most important thing, I think. Um, but how you go about doing this, I don't know. Um, there are people who are researching this. This is not the area of my expertise,
Mm.
but um, I would assume that is the best quality that you can teach
The
a young.
ability to think for yourself.
Yeah.
Is that is that something that you see as more difficult to acquire as you grow up? Is it something that needs to be instilled from a young age?
Well, yeah. I think that is generally the case.
Mm.
Um, Children are more moldable, um, and that's a good trait to have. Uh, and I think that is one of the things that is being done better in the United States.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I people say a lot that U.S. children don't know enough math or uh, science
Mm.
in general, but one good piece of education that they get um, is the um, is kind of more like critical thinking or more of a soft skill
Mm.
uh, than a hard mathematics skill.
So I mean, it's certainly a transferable skill that you can take to any field or domain that you end up in,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
It's,
And that is an important part of being a scientist, to be able to think critically. Yeah.
mm, yeah. I know I'm trying to pick your brain as much as I can because I mean the answers you're giving I think are very relevant and important for younger individuals to hear. If if you're someone in a society that does not teach that, how would you go about maybe attempting to acquire it yourself, the ability to think on your own? Is there something that you can do? Whether meditation, is it speaking to anyone, whatever it could be?
Well, closest thing I can think of is to doubt everything.
Ooh,
Uh, just as Descartes says. Uh, so that's kind of um, that's the hard way to do it, I think.
doubt everything.
Doubt everything. Yeah.
So to
Hard
start
way, but sure way to get there.
to start off by default, being skeptical and
Yeah.
questioning everything that you come across.
Being skeptical. That's a good one.
And then that naturally develops your critical thinking because you're thinking twice rather than accepting things as they are.
Yeah, exactly. Or American way of saying it is take everything with a grain of salt.
Fair enough. Okay. I have one last question for you, and this is going to be more of a general one. Let's assume that someone who happens to be a high school student in the 11th or the 12th grade, they're about to graduate, or maybe a bit before that, they're trying to apply for a university, right? And they're intently considering a career in science. What would you tell them? What advice would you give them in one, deciding whether it's a career for them or not, and two, what they can do to prepare for that career?
Well, I think anybody can be a scientist. So
it's a bold statement.
Yeah, it is. As long as you're a human, you can be a scientist.
Fair enough.
But to get prepared for that, if you're in high school, let's say, my only advice is to learn as much mathematics as you can. Although it is hard, it's supposed to be. It's not. It's supposed to be feeling frustrating. And the only way to get through it is to enjoy practicing it. I know it's kind of counterintuitive, but if you can get joy out of doing algebra or studying identities in algebra, or taking derivatives, or calculating integrals, or solving a number theory problem, or studying geometry, you can succeed. I mean, not all majors require good mathematical foundation, but that would open a lot of doors for people if they are grounded in solid mathematics. Solid math.
Would you say that coding as well is something that's become necessary, or is that a take it or leave it type of situation?
Well, if you're good at math, learning coding is pretty easy. And yeah, of course, nowadays it's like knowing a second language. That I think coding is something that it's easy to learn by yourself, even if at your later stages of, let's say, high school or college. But my first and foremost suggestion would be mathematics.
And everything follows from there.
Everything follows from there.
Thank you very much, Mohammad, for the amazing insight. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure speaking with you. And I look forward to seeing more of your work. And hopefully in, say, 5-10 years, maybe the situation in the Middle East will be different than what we discussed here today. For all we know, as long as we have remarkable scientists like you that are pushing forward and doing their best to be amazing in what they do, and advising younger professionals in the same way that you've graciously spoke with us today.
Yeah, it
Um,
was my pleasure.
I have hope in what we get to see in the future. Inshallah,
Yeah,
one day.
thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mohammed. Beautiful.